Greetings and welcome to the 2017-2018 PLP Pathways webinar series. Tonight is our first webinar of the year, and we'll be talking about the personal learning framework, the 3 pillars of personalization, identity, and maybe just encouraging teachers to think about their calendar and how they can start structuring their year around PLP work, proficiency-based learning, and flexible pathways. I'm Don Taylor. I work in Montpelier at Main Street Middle School, and my fellow contributors will now introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Maura Wheeler. I'm the Proficiency-Based Learning Technology Integration Coach at Lamoille South Supervisory Union.
I'm Allison Gothier. I teach high school science at U32 in East Montpelier.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hunt. I'm a 5A generalist at Williston Central School in Williston.
And I'm Lindsey Alma. I work on a 7-8 team at Essex Middle School.
All right, thanks guys. This is our 3rd year of these PLP Pathways webinar series, and I just want to reiterate the fact that we're here for this is work that's done by teachers and for teachers, and the primary purpose of PLP Pathways is to help folks implement Act 77 in their classroom, to recognize the resources that are across the state, and to make connections with other educators who are doing great work. We're going to start off by thanking the Middle Grades Collaborative for support of this work, as well as the Tarrant Institute. And I just kind of want to start out by asking everybody on the panel how you've started your year in terms of working with students and identity, and maybe how that relates to our personal learning framework. Before we get to their answers, I just want to remind viewers that you can access any of the materials that we have at plppathways.com. You just Google that and it should come up. You can also follow us on Twitter. So again, we're using a personal learning framework that breaks the year and our work with personalization into 3 phases. The first phase is identity, the second phase is growth and reflection, and the third is transformation. And teachers and panelists, how are you guys working with identity, and how's it going in the 4th or 5th week of your school? We'll start with Allison, Kevin, Lindsey, and then Maura.
Sure. So I'm on a 9th grade team. We are comprised of social studies, math, science, and comp and lit. And as a team, we have decided to divide and conquer the identity pieces based on what fits best with our discipline. So social studies is looking at culture and what it means to be part of a society, part of a culture. So they're taking the about me and introduction. How I learn surveys are being done in math classes, and comp and lit is doing a piece around identity with principles and values. Once those 3 components have been explored by the students, then science is going to be looking at goal setting. That also give us a little bit of time to get to know the student as well before they make their goals.
All right, Kevin?
So we always start our school year off with the 2nd week of school. We take all of our kids on a camp out, and that's kind of our first go at team building. And I know for me, that's one of the best moments. At the end of one of the nights, we have a big kind of candlelight event where it's really silent and kids share what they're thankful for. And this year was one of the biggest sharings that we've had in terms of having our 5th through 8th graders share. And it really, those established the relationships early on. Getting into the classroom, we did our About Me page where the kids wrote their autobiographies for their identity page and their PLP. We just finished up the principles and values survey, and they did some reflections on what their outcomes, what those outcomes meant to them. And some other things that we're exploring this year, school-wide, everybody wanted to do an executive functioning survey so kids could learn a little bit more about themselves as learners and what their executive functioning strengths and weaknesses are. So we've been using those results to help us guide the conversations as we've been meeting with our returning students to tweak their goals that they've already established in the past, and our new students to help make those 5 PLP goals that we use on our PLP sites.
Awesome. Lindsey?
So I teach on a 7-8 looping team, and we have 70 7th graders, so we're in our 1st year of the loop. And so we spent a lot of time also in the beginning of the year doing a lot of community building. Tomorrow we actually go on a team-wide field trip to do some work off-site at Mill Riverside Park in Jericho to do some more team building. But and like Allison said, we kind of are dividing and conquering since there's 3 of us on this team, and so we looked at it in an interdisciplinary way as well. So first, across the board in our advisories, we started with our negotiated curriculum model of developing questions and concerns they have about themselves and questions and concerns they have about the world. And through that group work with their questions, they are establishing common themes. And then next week, our work is developing one theme from, each group will pick one theme to develop further that will guide their personal interest projects for the year, which will be part of their personalized learning plans. So we've also been doing in their humanities classes, they've been working on their About Me. They did the story of their name. We read Sherman Alexi's picture book, Thunderboy Jr., which was a great launching point for thinking about your name and the meaning of your name. And they went home and interviewed an adult that had a story to tell about how they got their name, to find out more about who they were. We're going to be doing some, just like Kevin said, some more exploring of how they learn, what type of learner they are, and that will start to inform more of their About Me section of their personalized learning plan. So those are the pieces that we've been working on.
Awesome. Maura?
I don't have a classroom this year for students, so it's a little different for me. But I can tell you that I've had teachers reaching out looking for, learners' interest surveys and learning style surveys, and thinking about how to really capture that identity phase and not just limiting it to a self-biography, like an autobiography at the start of the PLP, but really starting to think deeply to have students identifying interests in those different pieces that are so important before we get into goal setting. So I know that's been happening around our schools.
All right. Again, it's just, I never feel like I get it quite right, because this year we started out, I used Lori Lisai, has a geography of self, a unit that was on the PLP Pathways website. And so what we started with, I didn't want to start out with the biographies right away. I started out with the relationship webs, and we looked at that as a map, like kids mapping out their relationship. And that is right in line with our study of geography. And so I'm trying to integrate these ideas of geography into a personal geography. So what are the relationships that I'm involved with? And then another question that we have, what's my relationship to the environment? What's my relationship to place? And what's my relationship to the community? So one of the things that I did is I asked them to do a mental map. I gave them a map and I said, here's your house, here's the school. Could you map out your route? And it was amazing how difficult that was. And what it made me realize was that kids become habituated to patterns. And so they see a lot, but they don't notice very much. So instead, what we started doing is taking these walks outside where we started doing close observations. And then it kind of went a different direction. I started asking, well, how do you remember things? And then we started identifying elements of memories, like emotional responses and triggers and being asked to notice. And then we tied that into their favorite places. And so now we're kind of looking at geography and this geography of self, using the terms of geographers, but it's personal. And it just it's been kind of interesting to hear them use language and also to start using sensory language. So we're bringing in this literacy piece of describing places and then also visualizing them, and then using different art forms or pictures to kind of enhance that. And so eventually what's going to happen is they're going to have a geography of self product that's going to include a couple different maps. One will be their relationship web, another will be a map of place. They're also going to write about their favorite place through poems and poetry using sensory language. And then they're going to have some pictures and visuals of the physical and human features that impact sort of their lives. So it's and then once we have that, then I'm going to have them write their identity, their biography, so that they'll have thought about all these different ways of looking at themselves before they do the biography. But we are actually having them do the Myers-Briggs next week, which they're very interested in figuring out how they learn. And I just want to go back to what Lindsey was saying about one of the things that I haven't done very well this year is thought ahead about what text sets I could be using with these exercises. And so when Lindsey talks about, Sherman Alexie or these picture books, I start to think, what could we be doing to enhance the kids' thinking and experience around relationships and using that literacy? Because at the end of the day, we want the kids to be thinking about themselves, but we also want to understand and build strong relationships on what we know from those kids. And so anyway, I mean, you guys are always doing great work from a lot of different angles. And I just think it's great to hear that. I did write a blog last night about how important relationships are and how no matter what type of identity work you're doing, that building those relationships throughout this first part of the year is so critical for helping students and meeting them where they are and knowing how you can engage them in more detail. And just as people are building their identity units and working on that, can you just describe to me how you're working in the goals and what your timeline is for goals? And then maybe, I know Maura is going to an open house tonight. You're going to be looking at the open house. What are some of the things that you want to that you expect to hear about goals and evidence as you're listening to kind of teachers introduce this to families? And we'll start with Maura and then go right down the row.
I think right now the primary focus around, for us at least within a system, is really around our grading and reporting shifts. So the goal setting conversations will be happening more at the student-led conferences that actually happen before our first quarter ends. And so that's where students are really pitching the goals to their parents. So that's the opportunity where students are really talking about goals and teachers are talking about goals. And so we're sort of leading up into some of those conversations and really just getting to know families tonight. And so that's sort of where that's headed.
Okay, Lindsey?
Yeah, I mean, to echo pretty much same to Maura, because we also do our goal setting conferences in October. And so all this work is leading up to the time where they come and lead their conferences and talk about what, their hopes and dreams are for the year and what their goals are. At the same time, we're helping them understand how to set goals. We've been taking 2 transferable skills, self-direction, and then responsible and involves citizenship, I believe that is, if I'm getting it right without looking at it. And we've created learning targets for them, and in in language that is really comfortable for them. And every week we use that to frame our team weekly goals, so around self-direction and the community engagement piece. And we are asking them to reflect on those each week. So we're helping them understand how it ties into the proficiencies and the transferable skills, and also modeling goal setting right now on a small scale.
Got it. Kevin?
Since we're a 5-8 team, our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders start the school year with the goals that they finished with from the trimester 3 of their previous year. And we typically have our goal setting conferences finishing up around this time and into the first week of October. Our hopes and dreams conferences for our new students and 5th graders, we send out something in our summer mailing that has a profile form, and in that we kind of explain our PLP and we list out the 5 transferable skill areas, because we have a goal per transferable skill area. And the students and their parents brainstorm what are their strengths and challenges around each area. They come in before the school year starts, and then we have that conversation and kind of start them off with those goals. And then, similar to what Maura was saying, we have student-led conferences at the end of the first trimester, but instead of establishing goals, at this point, they would have collected a bunch of evidence and put on their Google sites, and then the students lead their conference and just basically have their PLPs open and show growth for each of their goals. And that's where we have the conversation about whether or not the goal is working for them, if we want to tweak the language, if it makes sense, what challenges they had finding evidence is. If they want to advocate for themselves and change the goal, they provide the evidence for that and explain that at that time. So yeah, we're just in the process now of finishing up with our returning students, kind of tweaking their goals and figuring out if they're changing any or keeping the ones that they had last year.
Okay, Allison?
So I think we made the mistake last year of doing the goals like too early, jumping into it before we really understood the student's identity. But then it's kind of like this happy medium, because then if we get too far and it's at the conferences in November. So I'm still talking with the team about when we think like the right time would be, that we know them well enough and can set a reasonable goal with the students based on their identity and how they learn, but not too late that it's like they could have already had evidence for that goal. So we're still finding that happy medium. I'll keep you posted.
Right. I was in the, oh, Lindsay, go ahead.
I just have a question, and then Don, of course, you need to share your piece, but I just wonder if, and because I heard Kevin say it, if folks are thinking about having kids intentionally connect their goals to the 5 transferable skills in some way, whether it's one or a combo, because that's kind of the direction we're heading in. We've been talking a lot about this year, and I wonder what people's thoughts are.
Well, I can tell you, I have a couple points. One is that Kevin's idea of bridging goals from the end of the trimester to the beginning of the next year, I thought that was really interesting. And I wonder if that would, get kids on the ground, like going, and just to speak to that, one of the things that we did is I asked our 8th graders to review their PLPs from last year and to reflect on their PLPs. Like most of you, I've had our students look at the transferable skills and rewrite them into language that they're familiar with. And we're starting to ask kids to use that language in their reflection and also in like learning targets. Okay, today we're going to be working on collaborating and or communicating. And so we're trying to work that language into our learning targets on a daily basis. And then the other thing I want to share is that Lindsay, a team here, one of the teams led by Eli Rosenberg and Katie Lehman has been doing the emails home each week. And we've started that too. And I tell you, it is amazing the difference between the first week and the second week after their parents have read them. But we're going to start putting in the transferable skill language into those as well. And I think this, to answer a long-winded answer, but I think what's happening is that as the kids get familiarity with that language, they can easily build them into goals. But I also want to point out that we do a lot with the transferable skills around goals, but I'm also very cognizant that I need to know kids' reading ability. Mm-hmm. And so we have a new program this year that our literacy specialist or interventionist, it's called iReady. And it's a really good program that identifies where the kid is lexile, vocabulary, reading comprehension. So at the same time, I'm encouraging kids to think about goals that are going to go on their PLP. We're also starting to ask kids to reflect on their own data and their own performance, and maybe include academic goals as well, and kind of wend them all together so that the skills or the goals that they're building are reflective of the skills, but also reflect a deep understanding of their own strengths and challenges.
Can I add something about the goal setting and aligning that with the transferable skills? I think that when we're talking about transferable skills, it's really, they're skills that students have ownership over. And by really framing our goal setting and using the skills in a way that students are reflecting on them, it really continues to empower students around that. There's still some teaching that needs to happen around the transferable skills, and opportunities need to be provided for students to grow as individuals around the transferable skills. But I think rooting it in goal setting it really takes the ownership and it gives it back to the students, because it is their skills and dispositions that they should be reflecting on and really having ownership over, as opposed to something that a teacher is grading. And so I think framing it and really keeping the focus really keeps the ownership and empowerment at the student level, and it keeps it really student-centered. So I think it's really great to keep that in the center of what we're working towards.
Yeah, and that's one thing we've noticed. When I came on to Swift, again, this is, you have to remember, their 27th year now using PLPs. And they started with the Vermont Vital Results. So for us, like, that transition into transferable skills was just a no-brainer, just because more or less the same concepts and ideas. And what I've noticed after having conversations in our PLP committee at school, that other teachers were really struggling with, because other teams were just doing one academic goal, one personal goal, and they said, no, the goal setting, it was hard, because some of them, like for personal goals, like I can do a kickflip on my skateboard, and they were decent goals, but I feel like having the goals embedded within those transferable skills, it gives it more of that executive functioning piece automatically. And again, it's that whole transferring knowledge. So many of our students at the time of their conferences, we asked them to provide at least 4 pieces of evidence per goal. And very seldomly do we see all evidences from a classroom. It's always, you get some from a math, some from an ELA class, some from world language, some from home, whatever they're doing on the sports field or with their siblings. And it's really opened that up for us. And it's been, like Maura was just saying, the ownership over it has been incredible. And I think it makes it easier for the kids to get around the goals too, and start thinking about how they are as learners and as people, like just whole individuals, not just, in the classroom, but outside the classroom walls.
Allison, do you have any? No, I guess not. So one thing also I just want to mention, while you guys are discussing the transferable skills and goal setting, I just want to mention 3 things. One is reflection, and kind of constant reflection, and having kids always thinking about what they're doing. The other one is feedback, consistently getting feedback from your students about how it's going. I can tell you that today, when I asked them to email their families, there was a lot of groans, right? And so that's one of the things. Why do we have to do this? Well, it's an authentic audience. But I think I need to go back and get feedback from them. Why do you like this? Why don't you like it? What could make it better? And that is so critical. And then also the feedback, but this self-assessment. So one of the things that we've been setting up for kids is we do a reading self-assessment, where I just have them do a Google form, and it says, on a scale of 1 to 5, I understood this. Here are the strategies that I used, other comments. And so every time they read something, maybe in social studies or across the curriculum, I just say, hey, fill out the assessment form. And at the, after 4 to 6 weeks, they'll have a bunch of data about what strategies they're using, what they're not using. And then that becomes more information that they can set goals on using the transferable skill language. And it also allows them to reflect and then to build goals out, right? So once you get into the process or these habits of using the transferable skill language, reflecting, self-assessment, and using feedback, I think it becomes a lot easier to set the goals, right? Because the kids are in that type of language. Anybody else have comments on goals? Or I guess one additional piece is, how are folks communicating with families right now as the year starts? Some of us are on new teams. And so how are you getting the word out to folks? And do you have any tips for people who might want to improve their communications with families?
I can start.
Yep.
So I just want to return to the 3 things that you just said. As you all know, we do a Monday memo during our team meeting. The kids are developing a memo that they share with their advisor and a family member, a parent or guardian. And on Friday, we do the Friday letter home to reflect on the week, but more just basically share evidence of what they shared on Monday. So here's what we're doing, and now here's the evidence. So we've been doing that as form of communication. We also send out every Friday from the team a weekly newsletter with what's going on in core classes, but also what's going on kind of the big picture for parents, because we are a brand new team and there's a lot of questions when something's new. So back to the second thing you said, Don, we did, I think it was last week, we asked the kids for feedback. We did a Google survey and got a lot of feedback about how things are going, what is working, what's not working, what changes they'd like to see made. And that was really, really informative for us working as a new team, and very helpful. And I really noticed that since we gave that survey, there's really a shift in just the relationships too. Just kind of brought everyone tighter together, and also like being more, like people are just more honest, and you know, they advocate for themselves and they feel like they're comfortable coming, you know, to the adults on the team to share what's working, what's not. And it really shifted the culture very immediately once we gave them that survey, which I found to be interesting. I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I always encourage teachers to be getting feedback. And I think there's sometimes there's a fear out there, you know, that kids are going to say, "Oh, this is." And one of the things that I like to do is if they say something stinks, throw it up there on the board and say, "This is how you guys responded. How are we going to make it better?" Right, and kind of use that as problem solving. Kevin and Allison, what about feedback, or how are you getting feedback or reflecting, etc.?
Yeah, so this year I'm trying something new with because we do weekly goal reflections, and one thing that's really helped us is every Wednesday we have a half-hour chunk that's just for PLPs, and that's something we started a few years back. That's just like that sacred time that we know once a week these kids at least have that time in school that's for goal reflections and adding evidences. This year, using the new Google Sites, we couldn't use that third-party app that creates a template and blasts out to everybody, so each student had to start their site from scratch, what I thought was awesome and a great learning process. We kind of talked about what our non-negotiables were, and so everybody has the same tabs, but they were able to personalize it from there. And then I had the students make their own Google Forms, and on those forms, they listed out their 5 goals, so communication, problem solving, informed integrative thinking, whatnot. And so they're going to now be doing their weekly reflections on this form, which I'm hoping they'll start seeing, because they embedded their Google Sheet, the responses to that form right below it. So I'm hoping that over time they'll start seeing some patterns and trends and start using, you know, that data and analyzing their own responses when it comes time to change their goals, so they can see, you know, how they've been thinking about those goals on a week-to-week basis. We're still trying to do more with getting specific student feedback. I know I had that presentation yesterday down in Montpelier. I brought a couple of students, and one of the teachers asked like what they thought about something, and you know, the insightful comments they have about, you know, how we could tweak things and change it. It's like you said, Don, it's sometimes it's scary because you have a system in place that works, and it's can be rocky to think about, you know, changing everything midway, but at the same time it's super important to at least hear their voices and start thinking about, you know, it's their personal learning plan, so what can we do to make it better for them?
Right on. Allison?
No, I just think Google Form is so, yeah, it's such an easy tool. Even from today, I was just telling you all before we went on a field trip, and you know, the teachers had a couple learning targets for the day, but is that what the students got out of it? Was it a meaningful experience in terms of what we were supposed to be learning in terms of geology and culture of granite and berry, you know? So even just using it as a discussion point of that question and the answers up on the board, and seeing if this was meaningful for them, just as a quick example.
And I think too that I like that idea, Kevin, of having them, you know, that's a great idea about having Google Forms on the goals, right? So if you have these goals, how'd you do on your goal? And just maybe keeping data on that, and that they could then, you know, sort of reflect on that data. That's a very interesting, you know, an interesting idea. I already have like 5 pages of notes, and so I'm starting to get a little, whoa, I got a lot of work to do. But I also just kind of wanted to talk about some of the events that people are doing. I want to, Kevin, I know presented, but I do also want to publicly acknowledge the hard work that Lindsey did in her Cultivating Pathways to Sustainability. Lindsey, I've been meaning to send an email just about how great that was. It's in its second year at Shelburne Farms, and we took a bunch of kids up there, and it was a really nice day. And Lindsey, do you just want to talk a little bit about that, and also about how you're using the United Nations sustainability or Sustainable Development Goals in your program?
Sure. So thank you, Don. It was a really great day. This is year 2, and this year we had, just more people than we could even accommodate. So we were at almost 200 youth and adults there, from all over the state. We had Orleans and Manchester and everywhere in between, 5th grade through high school seniors, and thinking about how the Sustainable Development Goals could be used to frame project work that will make a difference in their community, both in connected to maybe their personalized learning plans or a team action plan, or lots of different groups came with lots of different purposes. But the day was just for people to orient themselves with the goals, or reorient, because a lot of people are familiar with them now. Last year, in the first year, people had never heard of the goals, because they were established in 2015. So now people are more familiar, and they're using them in their curriculum and as a framework for projects. But we had time for people to get to know one another, action plan with their teams. We had experts, community partners there available to do some consultations with them, think about which goals they're going to focus on, and what work they hope to do when they went back. So it was just 10 to 2, short, but I think it was time well spent, and we can't wait for it to continue on throughout the year. We'll have a follow-up event in the spring, April or May, where groups come together and present their learning and their work and get feedback and continue on. And we hope this just continues and continues.
Well, I also just want to say, and I would put this on folks' radar, that some of the community partners that were there were really impressive. And I think number one is you should go to that UN Sustainable Development Goal website, because they have a ton of resources, easy ways to connect almost all of the subject areas to these goals. And one thing that really struck me was the idea, in my class, we're doing this green team. We've been doing it for a long time, which is very local classroom school. And these UN sustainability goals, one of their missions is to get kids connected outside of their immediate community, both in the, in the state, nation, and world. And so it really has the potential to sort of take kids beyond their classrooms. I thought that was impressive. But the Vermont Folk Life Center was there. They had a representative there. They had Our Curriculum Matters, Amy Demarest, who was there. It's all about place-based learning. And all these folks have websites that are unbelievable resources. The Ben Freeman was there from the Future of Vermont Learning. Really interesting talk with him. And as I'm meeting these people, I'm actually asking them, would you want to be involved in PLP Pathways, and what's your role in personalization? So again, Lindsey, I thought it was great. Kate Toland and Jen Cirillo were also sort of organizing it. And these are people who are super dedicated, very articulate, and can hook teachers up with resources like on the spot. So that was really good. And Kevin, can you talk a little bit about your presentation yesterday and just maybe a little more details on that? And I believe that's part of a workshop series.
Yeah, it's part of a workshop series called Where Is It Working? Bill Rich put it on as part of the Vermont Higher Ed Collaborative. So basically, there's a series of workshops. There's 4 throughout the school year. And the big thing that I love about Bill Rich is he really makes it a workshop. He puts all that word work in caps, because it's like an hour and 15-minute presentation. Then he provides at least an hour's worth of work time to kind of digest what you just got and start implementing it. So it's not just like presenter, go home and then freak out because you don't have any time to do anything with it. So it really gives you the time there to do the work. There's different themes for each. I'd have to pull up the schedule. I know I think the next one is really looking more at differentiation and kind of that link between differentiation, personalization, and where there's connections and where there's differences. And I'd have to look at the theme for the last one of the last two conferences. So I was one of 3 presenters. I brought a couple of students. Us to present on our PLP structure here on Swift and how we make it work so it doesn't feel like extra work on the teachers, and how it's meaningful. Bill presented with one of his students on, it's called What's the Story?
Mm-hmm.
It is, and I was floored. I've heard a little bit about it, but listening to them present, I'm all about trying to get my students involved in it because it's incredible. I was pumped to see a few of my former Swift House students are involved in it. And then the last group was at CPU. There's 2 instructional coaches, Dan Williams and Emily Rinkema, who have started this thing called the Think Tank. And it's really just getting at, here's a group of students who want to change education, and they're doing some brain-based research, some education research, and those high school students are being consultants throughout our district, helping teachers say, hey, we want to help you to better engage your 5th graders. Like, here's what we're learning in our research, here's what we're really passionate about, here's some ideas we're bringing to the table, which is a really cool system. And then that think tank trickles down. So they asked each middle school team to send 4 students as a broader, more collaborative think tank across the whole district. So I guess yesterday's workshop was more just that idea of personalization as a whole. But it was pretty powerful, and good amount of people there, great feedback and ideas from people from all over the state.
And were you pumping PLP Pathways up there, Kevin?
Sure was. It was on.
All right. We got to get you. We got to get some logo and shirts and gear, man. Some swag so you can show up with with the website right across the front.
I think I tagged PLP Pathways on Instagram and Twitter.
Okay, cool. But seriously though, like, I think one of our missions, right? There's so many people doing great work out here, and I think what we need to think about doing is making those connections. And we don't have to do all the work, but boy, we can sure make connections. And if we have resources that we can help out with, and in fact, Bill Rich is going to be a guest on the webinar, I think later in January. We also have Lauren Traster, who's running the University of Vermont 4-H Extension Program. So they have, if you haven't checked that out, I would definitely look at that webpage. Oh, there, look at Lindsey.
I had my application. I had kids looking at the Try for the Environment application today.
Have you had kids do that before?
It's amazing. Yeah, I had kids do it last year. Our team was trained. Really good training. Lauren's so wonderful. And they did the food systems curriculum last year, and then they taught 2 different classrooms of 4th graders about the food systems, 6 lessons. So that was like 12 lessons total. And then they even went to the Sustainability Academy in Burlington because we wanted to partner with another district and tailored the lessons for their kindergarten classes. And that was really amazing. And I have students this year that are going to go and do the energy fundamentals. And so we're really excited. We have a focus on energy this year through our science course. So
that's awesome. So yeah. And Lauren, if you get on her email list, she has a bunch of new programs too. So she's got this one called the Teen Science Cafe, where they're going to be having, really it's for 9th to 12th graders, but she said if the right 8th grader sends in an application, but it's going to be kids getting together and talking about science. And there's some online pilot programs she's doing as well. And again, as people are thinking about their program, like the YES conference, which is happening in November, these are things where kids can go present to authentic audiences, but they can start knocking out goals and they can start demonstrating their proficiency across a much wider audience. So as you guys are going out and developing these resources and talking to people, let's spread the word and get people connected. I think that makes us all better. Now, we have about 5 minutes left, and what I would like to do is just really maybe talk about our professional development pilot just a little bit. And then I'd also like to talk about the resources that we have and how people are communicating personally. And when I say that, I mean, as educators, what are you using right now to stay up to speed we talk about this kind of every year. A lot of people are using Twitter. A lot of people are blogging. Are there any other resources that you would, shout out that you think are really valuable to what's happening? And we'll start with Allison and just go right down the row.
News ELA is a really good one I've been using a lot to differentiate literacy stuff in science articles. That's the first one that came to my mind.
Okay. Kevin?
Yeah, I would echo what Allison just said. And as you were saying, Don, I just think that social media piece has been really helpful, and just hearing from other teachers and seeing what's going on around the state.
Okay, Lindsey?
So, as far as a professional learning network, Twitter has become really a place to go for all sorts of amazing resources and articles and inspiration. But I also, at the Middle Grades Institute this summer, we started a YA book club, and we now are on our 4th book, I believe. And we meet monthly, but I believe that Jeannie Phillips and Katie Farber put together like an online network as well, so that people who can't meet monthly, we're meeting in Winooski in October, and we're reading Refugee. But we're reading a lot of books connected to different social justice issues, and it's been amazing. So people have come from all over. We had 3 Middlebury College students drive up to Shelburne for the last one because they'd seen it on Twitter. And so we're reading a book together and then discussing it, and it just leads to more than just a book discussion, because it leads to so many ideas and resources and connections. So I would highly encourage anyone who can make those book clubs to join us.
What's the tag on Twitter on that? Do you know?
Well, I don't know if we have a tag on Twitter.
Well, I mean, how do you find it?
How do you find it? Just follow Christy Knoll. So
okay. Got it.
No, I don't know if there was actually the Tarrant Institute wrote a blog post. Katie Farber wrote a blog post about this book club, because it started with The Hate You Give at the Middle Grades Institute. Then we read True Story of a Part-Time Indian, Sherman Alexie. Then we just read Same Sun Here, and now we're reading Refugee. And so there's a blog post that will give you all the info, and then we're meeting in October, and I can share information about that another time because I don't have my calendar right here.
Okay, cool. Maura?
So in terms of professional development and staying sort of current, definitely if you don't get the field notes from the AOE, it's just really helpful, quick package. I think you get it every Wednesday, and it just has like a little blurb about what's going on around the state, which is really helpful. I find it's really helpful to follow ASCD and get their daily email if you don't get that, which gives you a more national view of what's happening. And then one of the things that I'm noticing is a lot of school districts are putting out their own websites and communications about their shifts to Act 77, proficiency-based learning, personalization. And although that's not direct professional development, it's really interesting to look at how other schools are managing these changes. And so I always find that I learn a lot from that. And I feel like I'm constantly going back to the Great Schools Partnership, really living in the proficiency world. I'm constantly going back to the Great Schools Partnership and reading their blog posts and their resources and finding experts through some of their work. So that's sort of where I've been living recently.
Okay. And I always, I think I always pump these up, but there's some really great tech feeds on Twitter. One is Practical Ed Tech. I think his name is Richard Byrne, and his resources are unbelievable. He's also got a free, I think it's a teacher's tech ed book that you can download. And then there's another woman, Allison Keeler, or Alice Keeler, who sends out a monthly newsletter about tech that's quite good. And those are big ones for me, those the tech. And also then don't forget there's the VT Ed chats, the Twitter chats on VT Ed, which I find are really good too. And then another one, this might be a little bookish, but Google Scholar is really good. If you have a question, sometimes you can just go to Google Scholar and you can find research and information or short little articles that are excellent. And sometimes I use that as well. So the last thing I'd like to do is just real quick.
Can I add one more resource?
Go ahead.
Teaching tolerance.
Yes.
Has been like my go-to for many years, but in the recent years especially. They have excellent resources, tools, lesson plans, articles. You can get a weekly newsletter. You can get on a variety of lists and whatnot, and it's been amazing.
Awesome.
And they stay so current. So it's like the letter that you're getting that week, it's the conversation you just had with a kid at lunch. Like, it's so connected.
Okay.
Yeah, like this week was hashtag take a knee, and we just use that as our discussion during our circle of power and respect, and they give good resources and discussion questions.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm not even gonna go there because we'll be on here for another hour. So as our viewers may or may not know, PLP Pathways is branching out a little bit, and we're providing professional development support for MGI attendees. And we're doing a pilot program where we're trying to support folks who went to the MGI and wanted to do some action research on their own teaching. And those folks are in progress right now, and the 5 of us are going to be talking to them and kind of coaching them through, and hopefully providing a bridge from their professional development that occurred this summer to the middle grades conference. And the first thing, this sort of goes back to themes, and some of the things that they're responding and giving back to us are things that we've just talked about. So we asked our participants, we asked them, how are you feeling about your action research? And most importantly, we asked them, what can we do to support you, to help? And, you know, if we can get anything out of this, I hope that it's the notion that teachers can help and support other teachers in changing practice, and that collaboration can be sometimes more effective, I think, than top-down directives or standalone courses that happen in June, and then you're in September and you're like, you forget what you even did in June. So some of the things that I'm seeing on the feedback, and I have the feedback in front of me, is there's issues about engaging students, how teachers can engage students. There's also issues about feedback and the regular collection of data. And again, we talked about this regarding like Google Forms. And I guess the one thing I would say to our participants is that you should structure or schedule your feedback to make it regular, and also to consider what kind of data you want to get back. And the better your questions, I found, the better the data. And also, Allison's going to talk a little bit because she has her own action research project that's integrated into what we're doing. So I'm only going to ask you one question to the panel, and then I'd like Allison to talk just a little bit about her research. And then, you know, we're going to make our first consultations need to happen between now and the next webinar. So recommendations, again, if anybody has them about collecting data or the feedback and reflection pattern. And we'll start with Maura, and then we'll end with Allison.
In terms of feedback and reflection and those different pieces, I think it's important as teachers and as teams of teachers to think about creating like menus for self-reflection, you know, different opportunities for students, and then also thinking about what is evidence of student learning. And this is where working within a teaching team can be really helpful, so that when you do ask a student to reflect, it gives them a variety of choices to really go off of. And then that is tangible, like self-reflection evidence that a student has. So maybe you have options everywhere from take a photo of your work and write a few sentences to creating a video, talking through what they're doing, or getting interviewed by a peer. So I think, and then once you make those routines more common, students can really self-choose the reflection tool that best supports them as a learner. So that's sort of one thing that I think of when I think of self-reflection. And then really thinking about, you know, as teachers, we should be checking, sort of this idea of like checking more, assessing less. Like we should be checking and giving more constant, specific feedback to help our students grow. And so that's really where we're spending our time and focusing in conversations with students and really thinking about, the variety of ways that we give feedback to students, but really like that constant slow, kind of like the idea of like a slow drip, but like constantly giving students small pieces of actionable feedback that feels tangible and rooted towards whatever the target is that the student is reaching for. I think it's really crucial.
Okay, Lindsey?
Yeah, one thing that ties into the reflection piece, but also the identity work that I totally forgot to mention, was that we used Flipgrid this year. My teammate and I are part of this cohort with Bill Rich and Susan Hennessy. It's, I don't know what exact personalized learning, like learning lab. I don't know exactly what the title of it is, but we're part of a year-long cohort to show like what is actual personalization look like. And so we use Flipgrid to introduce ourselves, and we've had our kids use Flipgrid to both reflect and also share some information about themselves. I'd highly recommend it. It's really great, like Maura was saying about like having a menu of options, so it's not always just text-based, and it's more interactive, and they can give each other feedback through different forms of media. And then again, Google Forms have been really beneficial for us. It's quick and easy snapshots. All the kids know how to use it.
Okay. Kevin?
And then just
sorry, Lindsey.
It's okay.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, just echoing what Maura said, I think just having that routine in place where it's regular and happening often is great. One thing I've found is keeping reflections less formal has been helpful. Just kind of having it be, hey, just write a quick blurb each week about how you're doing with your goals. And just, it reduces the stakes on it, which I think, gives them more confidence when they're doing them. We utilize Google Classroom questions quite a bit, and those are great too if you're just blasting out a quick question to get some really quick feedback, because it's all compiled in one spot. So unlike a form, you don't have to open up a separate responses sheet and kind of navigate through looking at their responses on the cells, but it's written right out there on Google Classroom, which is super, super helpful. And then you can, of course, make it so they can reply to each other on there as well, or they can't see each other's answers. And we've been exploring using Seesaw just as a way of getting students to kind of take more pictures of what kind of things they're doing and having that be our better way of communicating home, because I think that can be directly linked to a parent's email so they get notifications every time something's updated. So we're playing around with like blogging ideas and using something like that just to increase our communication piece with home.
Okay, Allison?
Yeah, so it's great to hear all these ideas you all have for our teachers that we're supporting between now and the conference. So my action research, as Don stated, is specific to supporting those teachers. So actually getting feedback. So this is like a microcosm of feedback. We're getting feedback from our teachers with their surveys they're filling out through Google Form every month so that we know how to best address their needs in PLP Pathways. So I'm hoping that by modeling this for them in kind of like this teacher-to-teacher setting, maybe they'll take some of those ideas as well back to their classrooms and can do those Google Forms with their own students.
All right. So again, what's going to happen is I'm asking folks to complete their consultations by the next webinar. And I think the next webinar, I want to say, is October 16th, which I believe is, somebody has their calendar up. Could they check that? I don't have my calendar right up here. So
the 19th.
The 19th?
Yes.
Okay, so October 19th. And this is also on the syllabus on the Google Classroom. So on the 19th, I believe we're going to be talking a little bit more about goals. We'll also be talking about conferences and communications. And maybe we'll start delving a little bit into proficiency-based learning. And just, to reiterate, our PLP Pathways webinar is going to focus really on the 3 pillars of personalization, which are PLPs, proficiency-based learning, and flexible pathways. I'd like to thank all our panelists. I'd like to thank the folks for watching out there. And again, thank you to the Tarrant Institute and the Middle Grades Collaborative for their support. We'll see you next time.